Hi, I'm Charlotte. I want to share something that changed my life, the first time I spoke English in front of people. I was always nervous. I had studied English at home, but I never spoke it in front of anyone. I thought I would make mistakes. I thought people would laugh. But something happened one day that pushed me forward, and even though I was scared, I spoke. That one moment gave me the power to grow. I hope my story helps you too. When I first decided to learn English, I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my family. It was my little secret. I felt embarrassed, not because learning English was wrong, but because I didn't believe in myself. I thought people would laugh if they heard me speak with the wrong accent or say a word the wrong way. So I made my bedroom my classroom, and the mirror became my only audience. I spent hours after school in that quiet room. I had a small notebook where I wrote new words each day. I played simple English YouTube videos over and over again. I tried to repeat every sentence after the speaker. At first it felt silly. I stumbled over words. I couldn't even say comfortable the right way, and vegetables confused me. But even with all the mistakes, something inside me told me to keep going. I would stand in front of my mirror and introduce myself. Hi, my name is Charlotte. I love reading books. Over and over, again and again. Some days I laughed at myself. Other days I felt like crying. I wanted to sound fluent. I wanted to speak like the people in movies. But I wasn't there yet. And that made me afraid. What if someone asked me a question in English in real life? What if I didn't understand? What if I froze and forgot all the words I practiced? Those what-ifs haunted me. So I stayed silent in public. Even when I went to the grocery store, and the cashier greeted me in English, I smiled but never replied. When I sat in class and the teacher asked if anyone wanted to read a short paragraph aloud, my heart raced. I looked at the floor, pretending I didn't hear her. I was afraid to let my voice out. I was afraid people would hear the cracks in it, the hesitation, the insecurity. But inside that small private world in my room, I worked hard. I whispered conversations to myself like they were real. I pretended I was ordering coffee at a cafe. I created imaginary interviews. I made my stuffed animals my audience and performed mini speeches for them. And still, I never told anyone what I was doing. No one saw my effort. No one knew how many times I repeated the same line just to get the rhythm right. I didn't want praise. I just wanted to feel ready for the day I'd finally have to use my voice in public. I thought I could prepare forever in secret, that if I just practiced long enough alone, the fear would go away on its own. But I was wrong. The more I stayed in my bubble, the more nervous I became about leaving it. I was improving in private, but my confidence was still locked away behind the bedroom door. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. It was a regular Wednesday at school. I was sitting in English class, writing notes and listening quietly. As always, I avoided eye contact with the teacher. I thought if I didn't look up, she wouldn't notice me. But that day, she smiled and said, "Charlotte, why don't you come to the front and introduce yourself to the class in English?" My stomach dropped. I froze. Every part of me screamed, "No!" I wasn't ready. I needed more time. I wanted to say, "Please pick someone else," but I couldn't speak. My heart pounded so loudly I thought others could hear it. I looked at my classmates. Some were chatting, some were staring, some didn't even care. But to me, it felt like I was about to stand in front of the whole world. And then, I stood up. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe it was because I was tired of being scared. Maybe because deep down I knew that hiding forever wouldn't help me. Maybe it was just time. With shaking hands and a dry throat, I walked slowly to the front of the classroom. I remember that day like it happened just moments ago, even though weeks, and maybe now months, have passed since that morning. The sunlight streamed softly through the classroom windows, creating a warm glow that rested gently on each wooden desk and the scattered notebooks filled with half-formed sentences. The air felt heavy with anticipation, and inside me, a familiar knot of fear tightened uncomfortably in my chest. It was English class, my weekly safe zone, and yet the most terrifying place I'd ever known in my entire life. For weeks, the English teacher, Mrs. Miller, had been encouraging us to speak more, to practice introducing ourselves, describing our mornings, and sharing our stories. She believed that language learned in the heart would stay in the mind. But, despite her kindness and encouragement, I stayed silent, always polite, always listening, always buttoned up in the back of the class. I would repeat grammar exercises with neat handwriting, translate articles with care, and memorize vocabulary. But never, not once, did I raise my hand to speak. I told myself I would do it tomorrow, or the next day, and then put it off again. For me, English was something to be written and read, not spoken. And then that morning, a hush fell over the class as Mrs. Miller stood by the door, flipping through her attendance sheet. I'd gone through my routine, arrived early, took the front corner desk near the window, placed my notebook open and pens ready. I felt a strange calm as I focused on my breathing. I repeated in my mind the introductions I'd practiced alone. Hello, my name is Charlotte. I'm from Portland. I love reading and painting. I rang those words over and over in my head. Each repetition made me steadier, more sure. But right before class began, nerves returned full force. My heart thudded loudly, my stomach fluttered like a trapped bird, and my hands felt icy and numb. When Mrs. Miller looked up and said, "Charlotte, please come forward and introduce yourself," a spike of shock shot through me. Time seemed to slow. I blinked, uncertain. My palms grew wet with sweat. I wanted to vanish into thin air. All I could feel was my pulse racing, echoing in my ears. I could hear nothing else. No breathing classmates. No murmurs, no rustling pages. Just that single sentence bouncing over and over through my mind. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I knew this was the moment I had been preparing, without even realizing it. Months of quiet practice, repeat after repeat, had been leading me to stand here. Standing up, I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, took a slow, forced breath, and opened my eyes ready to face the class. I put one foot in front of the other. I walked slowly, oh so slowly, toward the center of the room, where other students sat in semicircle facing the front desk. Each step, left, right, felt like a silent declaration. I would do this. Right foot, left foot. I could feel every heartbeat, but I kept going. Upon arriving, I paused, placed my notebook on the desk, and straightened up. I looked at each face in the room. Mia, who always smiled when I spoke to her. Javier, whose eyebrows rose when I tripped. Over a word. And even Simon, who tapped his pen impatiently, leaning forward as though waiting for drama. I swallowed, unable to let any sound out, even though my mouth was dry. But that was okay for a moment. The first breath was the hardest. "Hello," I began softly. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "My name is Charlotte." I swallowed again, but this time I felt a small seed of courage growing. Not a giant oak, but a tender shoot. A promise. I gave myself permission to keep going, even if it was shaky and slow. I'm from Portland, Oregon, I continued, making eye contact with Mia first. She nodded and gave me a warm, encouraging smile. That tiny gesture, so unassuming, felt like a lifeline. One voice of quiet support in that circle made my own voice stronger. I love reading. The next words tumbled out, surprising me with their clarity. I spoke about my favorite books, stories of adventure and self-discovery, my favorite authors, the smell of the pages, the comfort of getting lost in their worlds. I spoke of painting, of following colors across a canvas, and how it felt like painting my own voice into the world, something I needed to do in English too. Each sentence took effort, but I kept going. My vocabulary was not perfect. A couple of words stumbled from my lips in the wrong order, I painting love. But I corrected myself silently and continued. I love painting. Little missteps, yet I persevered. Even as fire crawled in my cheeks and my voice wavered, I pressed on. I talked for nearly 2 minutes, which in my silent world felt like an eternity. But in the end, I said, "Thank you." A simple phrase, but loaded with every ounce of courage I had summoned that morning. Silence filled the room again, only this time it was as heavy as the one before. But that heavy quiet didn't crush me. It lifted me like an unseen hand lifting my chin gently upward. Then, slowly at first, came applause. One pair of hands, then another. The entire class clapped, not mockingly, but genuinely. The sound was deafening to my thumping heart, but the feeling was gentle, warm, and exhilarating. Breath releasing, my shoulders finally relaxed. I realized I had done it. I spoke. I faced the fear. I connected with them. And just like that, the classroom felt different. It felt a little more welcoming. A little less lonely. Mrs. Miller approached me, her eyes kind and proud. A single compliment on my shoulder. Well done. Those 2 words were medicine. They filled me with confidence and gratitude. Thank you, I whispered, still standing. At the front, taking in the moment. Still, I kept standing a moment longer, grounding myself. Then I walked back to my desk. Each step back felt lighter now, no knot in the chest, no tightness in the throat. As I sat down, I saw curiosity in their eyes. Some looked at me with admiration, others with new interest. Mia leaned closer and whispered, "That was amazing!" Jenna nodded. Simon lowered his pen and looked back at me without judgment, and then class moved on. We began grammar exercises, homework questions, an essay prompt, but something essential had shifted. Inside me, a door had opened. I realized I could speak English. I realized I could brave fear. I realized that even imperfect sentences have power. I realized nothing magical happened that morning. Just a girl named Charlotte practicing daily, taking a step into discomfort, and deciding not to look back. That moment didn't just bridge me to the next part of the class. It bridged me to the next part of my life. I now carried with me the knowledge that I could step forward again, speak again, grow again. As the day ended, I packed my bag with a quiet smile, walking out in the late afternoon sun. I thought about what came next. Would I sign up to speak? At a school event? Would I join a conversation club? I wasn't sure. but I knew what mattered most. I had listened to my own voice. And that simple act brought me closer to finding my confidence. Little did I know, the second I said, "My name is Charlotte," my journey shifted direction, and I was ready to move forward. I looked at everyone in the room. For a few seconds, time seemed to stop. My legs felt weak, and my palms were wet with sweat. I had never spoken English in front of so many people before. It was just a simple classroom, about 25 students, my English teacher, and a blackboard behind me. But at that moment, it felt like I was standing on a stage in front of the whole world. I could hear my heart beating loudly in my chest. My knees shook a little as I held the edges of the desk for support. Everyone's eyes were on me, and I could feel it, the pressure, the fear, the silent expectation. I opened my mouth once, but no sound came out. I closed it again, took a deep breath, and tried to calm myself. I had practiced for this moment so many times in my room. I would stand in front of my mirror, pretending to be confident. I had written my introduction on paper and memorized it. I even recorded my voice and listened to it again and again to fix my mistakes. But this, standing in front of real people, was something I had never experienced before. Still, I remembered something my grandmother once told me when I was little and too afraid to read a poem aloud in school. She said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, Charlotte. It's doing something even when you're scared." I repeated those words in my mind like a prayer. Then, slowly, I smiled. It was a small smile, but it helped me feel a little stronger. I looked up, raised my chin slightly, and began to speak. "Hello," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "My name is Charlotte." That was it, my first sentence. I had spoken it clearly. My classmates were still quiet, just watching. My heart was still racing, but I pushed myself forward. "I love learning English," I continued, "because it helps me talk to people from different places." I paused. I had made it past the introduction, and I hadn't made a big mistake. Not yet, at least. I continued, slower now, carefully pronouncing each word like I had practiced. I talked about my favorite books, like Charlotte's Web. I always liked that one because it had my name in it, and how reading helped me fall in love with English. I spoke about how I used to read short stories before bed and would underline new words and write them in my notebook. I spoke about my hobbies, drawing, listening to music, and watching animated movies in English. I even tried to explain how I had once translated the subtitles of a movie to understand a joke better. My grammar wasn't perfect. My accent wasn't smooth. But I kept going. At one point, I stumbled. I couldn't remember the word inspiration. I paused for a moment, looked down at the floor, and tried to think. The room was still silent. No one interrupted. No one laughed. So I smiled again and said, "Sometimes, I find good ideas when I read English books. They give me something special, like hope." That wasn't the perfect word, but it was honest. I moved on. With each sentence, I felt a little more confident. My voice became steadier, my breathing calmer. I was still nervous, but I was also proud. Proud that I was speaking in English. Not just at home, not in front of a mirror, but right here, in front of real people. I was doing what I thought I could never do. Something magical happened in the room. I started to notice it after I had spoken for about 2 minutes. People weren't just sitting there. Some were smiling. Others were nodding gently, as if encouraging me to go on. A few classmates looked surprised. maybe because I had never raised my hand in class before. They probably didn't expect much from me, but now, here I was, standing and speaking, and not giving up. It made me think of all the times I had stayed quiet in class, even when I knew the answer. I remembered how I had missed chances just because I was too scared to speak. And now, here I was, using those missed chances as fuel. I knew I was still learning, still growing. But today, I was moving forward. At one point, I noticed my teacher. She was smiling warmly. That smile felt like a soft blanket on a cold day. It gave me more strength than I thought possible. I continued speaking. I talked about why I wanted to improve my English. I told them that one day I wanted to travel to New York City and speak to people without fear. I said I wanted to read more books, talk to new friends, and maybe help someone else learn English just like me. I even said, I believe English is not just a language, it's a bridge. It connects people. When those words came out, I knew I had grown. I didn't plan that sentence. It came from my heart. And that's when I realized speaking English is not about being perfect. It's about being brave. Still, I wasn't sure what people were thinking. Were they bored? Were they waiting for me to finish? Were they secretly judging me? I didn't. No, I was too afraid to look around too much. But then something happened that changed everything, just as I finished my last sentence. Thank you for listening to me today. I paused and looked up. When I finished my speech, I stood there for a few seconds. Everything felt quiet. I could still hear my heartbeat. It was so loud inside my chest that it felt like the whole class could hear it too. My hands were slightly cold, and I remember squeezing my fingers to stop them from shaking. I looked at the teacher, then at the students. For a moment, no one said anything. And I thought, oh no. Maybe I said something wrong. But then, something unexpected happened. Someone in the middle row clapped, then another joined. And suddenly, the whole classroom was clapping. It wasn't just polite clapping either. It was warm. It was encouraging. The kind of applause that says, "We see you. We understand how hard that was, and we're proud of you." I felt a strange feeling rise up inside me. It wasn't just happiness. It was something more powerful. It was relief. I had spoken in English in front of all these people, and they didn't laugh. They didn't look confused. They clapped. I smiled, a small smile at first, but then it grew. The teacher stood up and said clearly, "Well done, Charlotte. You were brave." That word, brave, stayed in my ears. I had never been called brave before, not for anything related to English. In the past, I was the quiet one, the girl who avoided reading out loud or answering questions. I always sat in the corner, silently repeating English sentences in my head. But now, in this moment, someone called me brave. In front of everyone. I walked back to my seat slowly. My legs felt like jelly. My breath was still short, like I had run a long race. But even with all that, something had changed inside me. I was no longer the same girl who walked up to the front. I was walking back with a new version of myself, a version that had tried, had spoken, and had been heard. As I sat down, my friend Emma gave me a soft thumbs up. Another classmate leaned over and said, "That was really good." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and smiled. For the rest of the class, I didn't hear much of what the teacher was saying because my heart and mind were full of emotion. I remember going home that day and telling my mother everything. I described the moment in detail, how I stood, what I said, how people clapped. My mom hugged me and said, "I knew you could do it." I even cried a little, not because I was sad, but because I had held so much fear inside me for so long. And now that fear was breaking apart. But here's something important I want you to understand. That proud feeling didn't come from being perfect. It didn't come from speaking English with no mistakes. I did make mistakes. My grammar wasn't perfect. I forgot a word in the middle and had to pause. But I kept going. That's what made me feel proud. I didn't give up. You see, when you take that first step, something amazing happens. Not just around you, but inside you. You stop seeing English as something scary. You start seeing it as a path. A way to express your thoughts, your feelings, your dreams. And once you taste that feeling of being understood, of connecting with others in a new language, you want more of it. After that class, I started thinking differently. I didn't want to hide anymore. I didn't want to be the quiet one. I wanted to be someone who shared her voice, in English, even if it wasn't perfect. That one moment of clapping changed everything. It gave me something I had never truly felt before: confidence. Not the fake kind, not the pretend to be confident kind, but real confidence. The kind that is born when you do something hard and survive it. I went to bed that night replaying the scene in my head again and again. The silence, the clapping, the teacher's words, my smile. It all became a memory I wanted to hold forever. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious, but because I was excited. I wanted to speak again. I wanted to try again. And this time, I wasn't afraid. This was just the beginning. Something inside me had changed, something that would soon grow stronger. After that day when I first spoke in front of my classmates, something deep inside me changed, and it changed forever. I didn't just speak a few words in English that day. I fought my fear. I stood in front of my biggest enemy. Not other people, but the voice in my head that said, "You're not good enough." That voice had been there for years. Every time I wanted to say something in English, it would whisper, "You'll make mistakes. They'll laugh at you." And so, I stayed silent. But the moment I stood in front of my class and introduced myself, that voice became quiet. For the first time in my life, I realized that it wasn't my English that had been holding me back. It was my fear. That moment, just a short speech, less than a minute, opened a new door in my life. I walked back to my seat, but my mind was running with energy. I felt a lightness in my heart. I was shaking, yes, but I was also smiling. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it became smaller than my courage. From that day, my journey as an English speaker truly began. In the next few days, I started doing things I had never done before. I began raising my hand in class when the teacher asked questions. Sometimes I knew the answer, sometimes I didn't. But I stopped caring about being perfect. I just wanted to try. And each time I tried, something amazing happened. I got better. At home, I kept practicing in front of the mirror, but now I also practiced with my classmates. I asked one of them, a girl named Mia, "Would you like to speak English with me during lunch?" At first she was surprised, but then she smiled and said yes. We started talking in English every day, even if we made mistakes. We would laugh, help each other, and learn new words together. Speaking English became part of my daily life, not just something I did alone in my room, but something I shared with others. A few weeks later, my teacher announced a small English event at school. She said, "We are looking for volunteers to give a short speech about your favorite book or hobby." I looked around. Some students were excited, but many looked nervous, just like I used to be. My heart beat fast again. That old fear tried to speak. "You're not ready yet," it said. But then I remembered my first moment, and I thought, if I wait for the fear to disappear, I will wait forever. I have to move with fear, not against it. So I raised my hand. I gave a short speech on the book Charlotte's Web. I practiced it for 3 days at home, recorded my voice, fixed small mistakes, and even practiced smiling in the mirror. When I finally stood in front of the small audience, I felt nervous, again. But this time, I also felt strong. I looked at their faces, took a deep breath, and began speaking. I talked about why I loved the book, what it taught me about friendship and kindness, and how reading in English made me dream bigger. When I finished, the applause was louder than I had ever imagined. And this time, it wasn't just the sound of hands clapping. It was the sound of my fear being broken, piece by piece. After that day, things continued to change. I joined the school's English club. I started helping other students who were afraid to speak. I told them, I was just like you. I was scared too. But one small moment can change everything. I became a guide for students who wanted to speak English, not perfectly, but proudly. I started journaling my English journey. I wrote about my mistakes, my wins, my small progress. Each page was filled with new vocabulary, feelings, and ideas. It became my secret friend, my mirror. And when I read back what I had written a month ago or 2 months ago, I realized how far I had come. Soon, my teacher asked me to help lead a speaking workshop for younger students. I couldn't believe it. Just a few months ago, I was scared to say my name in public. And now I was being asked to teach others. I wasn't a perfect speaker. My grammar still needed work. Sometimes I still forgot words. But now I knew something more important than rules or vocabulary. I knew how to try. I knew how to rise after falling. I knew how to stand up and speak, even if my voice shook. Looking back now, I realize that speaking English is not just about words. It's about finding your voice. It's about telling your story, sharing your thoughts, and connecting with others. That one small moment in class became the root of something much bigger, a new version of myself. A girl who once hid behind her books was now standing in front of others, speaking, laughing, and helping. And you know what? You can do this too. You might be practicing alone right now. You might be scared of saying the wrong word. You might think no one understands your struggle. But I do. Because I've been there. I know how it feels to be quiet when you want to speak. I know how heavy fear can be. But I also know this. Fear gets lighter every time you try. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be brave for a few seconds at a time. That's all it takes to change your life. Thank you for listening to my story here on The English Tone. If you're afraid of speaking English in public, start small. Speak in front of your mirror. Say hello to someone. Raise your hand once. Every small step you take is a big win. Remember, confidence comes after courage, not before it. And if I, Charlotte, could do it, I truly believe you can do it too. So please like this video, Share it with someone who needs motivation, and subscribe to The English Tone for more real English stories like this. Comment below. What is one small step you'll take this week to speak English in public? I'd love to read your answers and cheer you on.